taught me to thrive, to do the impossible. So Keith, feel free to share your screen.
Awesome. Let's see. All right. Can everybody hear me? Well, I guess that's kind of a hard question to ask. I'm going to assume y'all can hear me. So my name is...
You see your screen.
So you can see my screen?
Yes. You're all
perfect. Awesome. Okay, great. Awesome. So first of all, thank you all for those who have showed up. I really appreciate it, and the support means everything. So thank you so much for being here. My name is O'Keefe Johnson, and I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm going to be talking about my presentation, which is Facing the Jabberwocky, How Student Affairs Work Taught Me to Thrive Through the Impossible. And so before I really get into the meat of the presentation, I want to give some quick permissions and challenges. And so I think this is important because I have a few things I want to address, and I also really care about being as authentic as possible. And it's, of course, very hard to do that through a screen. So I'm going to try and do all that I can. So the first quick note is I want to tell you that I'm going to be talking about some pretty heavy stuff, and I will not be sugarcoating it for you. I think that's really important, both for my experience of this presentation as well as your experience of this presentation. And one of the things I do want to say is that a part of my personal mission statement is being vulnerable in a way that empowers others to be just as vulnerable. And that kind of leads into the second permission and the challenge, which is, this is, to be honest, like my heart is like throwing up right now, which is okay. But that's because this is some really challenging stuff to talk about. And I am simultaneously terrified and very grateful for the opportunity to share with you. And so with that said, I'm going to give myself and vocalize for myself the permission to let my emotions exist freely. And I'm challenging you to do the same. So if I do get emotional, I trust that you're here knowing that that might happen. And then the last is that even though this is some really heavy subject matter, I do want to say that while it is heavy, I plan to leave you feeling inspired and making sure that, you know, like there's a hopeful ending to this. And more than anything, I think that despite the challenges that I faced in this situation I'll present, I think the biggest thing and most important thing that overpowers that challenge is the hope that love brings. And that sounds cheesy, but I think it's absolutely true. And so with that said, this presentation will be sent out to you, so you'll be able to see it later on and read through more of this. But this situation has taught me that I can face anything. And I also believe that regardless of your situation, it will help you do the same. So with that said, the first thing I'll go ahead and talk about is a Jabberwocky. So with that said, what is a Jabberwocky? This is a Jabberwocky. So basically, it's this massive, horrifying dragon, and is created by Lewis Carroll, who's the writer of Alice in Wonderland. But it has some really distinct qualities that make it more terrifying and horrible than a normal dragon might be. So the first is that there is only one sword that can kill this dragon. There's one and only one weapon, nothing else will work. And so that's the first aspect. And then the second aspect of this sort of creature, and even the sword that can kill it, is that on top of it, there's only one individual with that one sword that can kill it. So I think the quote from one of the movies is saying, if it isn't you who's doing it, it's not dead. And so with that said, to reiterate, one sword, one person, one Jabberwocky. And I believe everybody has their own personal Jabberwocky. And so I'll go ahead and say that as it pertains to the Jabberwocky, you can prep as much as you want. You can seek as much support as you can, and you can train day in and day out. But when you step onto the battlefield, you will step out there alone. And it will be your choice and your choice alone, not only how you choose to face this Jabberwocky, it will be your choice to even get on the field. And even more so, it'll be your choice to have the right sword in hand to face it. And I will go ahead and say, and I think it's really important to really take a moment and think about what your Jabberwocky might be. And one of the things that I will go ahead and express, I am reading a bit because this is an emotional topic for me. But with that said, I do want to say that it's really important to give yourself, in this situation and in your own life, the full permission to acknowledge that just because somebody else's Jabberwocky seems bigger or seems more challenging or something like that doesn't dismiss what yours is to you. And the fact that you are the one and only individual that can face that Jabberwocky is really important when it comes to validating your experience. So please keep that in mind. But I'll go ahead and say that my Jabberwocky, it came in the night. And so with that, I am going to read from some of what I have written, but I'll go ahead and say, this is my mom. This is me and my mom. And so what I'll say now is that there isn't a chance in heaven or hell that I could have known what my Jabberwocky looked like when it arrived this past summer. My Jabberwocky came to hunt me in the night. It came a month after learning my mom had been diagnosed with lymphoma. Just a month after repetitive assurance from doctors that she would be totally fine, she'd be in remission by Christmas, and that we had nothing to worry about. And that Jabberwocky came and found me less than a week after her first and only chemo treatment. So I will always remember what it was like to stand by my twin-size bed at my internship, my Kauai internship, 1,300 miles from home. And it was 11:30 at my time. And I saw my phone ringing, and I saw it was my dad. And to be completely honest, I panicked thinking, oh my gosh, our dog died. Toby's dead. And Toby's our very ancient wiener dog. And so my thinking was, oh my gosh, he's probably dead. Mama's probably devastated. And when I answered the phone, I heard my dad, and I will go ahead and say he's here. So thank you for being here. I heard my dad, and his voice was breaking. He was like, I am so, so sorry, but Mama died tonight. And I'm so sorry. And so there wasn't any kind of training for that. And I'll go ahead and, the spoiler is there's no student affairs training for getting that call. And so with that, I genuinely thought it was a joke. I thought it was the worst joke in the world. And of course, he'd never make that joke. But when something like that happens, you can't help but kind of sit there in shock and awe and think like, why would you make this horrible joke? And simultaneously, like, why can't I wake up from this horrible nightmare? And so I kept arguing with him when I was on the phone. I was like, no, she's not. How could that be the case? That's just not true. That's not what's happening. And finally, the Jabberwocky showed itself, and reality began to set in, and I began to scream and cry. And I fell to the ground, and my dad was on the phone, and he was crying on his end. And just as quickly, he had to go, because I have 3 siblings who also were getting the news at the same time that I was. And so for me, I was suddenly not just alone, but desperately wishing that my mom had taken me with her. And so with that said, I'm pretty sure some folks at this point are like, this is dark and this is really heavy and it's depressing and all those things. Or I should have gone to a de-stressing program, but we can't do that virtually. But with that said, I think as well, you haven't heard me mention student affairs, which is why you're here. I feel you, and I think that's really important. And I'll also go ahead and say, I think it is just as important and more important that I'm as honest and vulnerable with you as possible, because whether we talk about it or not, and whether we share it or not, very often, every single individual who is in this line of work manages this kind of stuff every single day, whether it is personal or a coworker or their department or a student that you're working with. We deal with these really heavy, dark things, these horrible Jabberwockies in our life. And a lot of times, I would not say student affairs, but I would say society really urges us to shut up and keep it to ourselves. And to me, the fact that, even in this meeting right now, if there's even one individual who is benefiting from hearing the really challenging aspects of this so that they can say, finally, somebody gets it, somebody knows what this is like, then that is a success. And my goal is to be as honest with you as possible. And it's also to say, isn't that the very crux of the work that we do in student affairs? It is doing all that we can to provide somebody who understands what's going on. And so as it does pertain to the student affairs aspect of this item, and how student affairs helped me, I could focus on the aspects of like, oh yeah, I've worked in housing for years, so I'm good at crisis response. I know how to let myself cry for a few minutes and then get a flight and get my bag packed and figure out how to move on from there. I know how to call the people that need to know about the situation as it pertains to my work. And I was back at my institution training within a week of my mom's funeral. And I'm not saying that as a brag, because I can say that was not the thing that I needed to do. But more importantly, it's really realizing that that the real actual part of the student affairs that really plays into what helped me work through this situation was specifically how much I was able to see through my work that I was capable of doing in the wake of my world crumbling. And so I will go ahead and say I am a massive fan of dark humor. I will say the photo on the left that you see is of my mom. That's her receiving a care package a week before she passed away. And fortunately, she got my package the day that she had her first chemo. And then to be quite honest, the second picture is, I'm sure, what a lot of individuals feel in the wake of this and dealing with a lot of trauma. And I think along with all of those items, I think it's really important to recognize, for me, how blessed I was to identify pretty immediately who the helpers really were and who could support me in holding my broken heart, because that is something that was very real for me. And now I am shocked to discover how feeling absolutely destroyed by this monster in my life, the way that it has allowed me a new perspective in my line of work, really does allow me to do a better job than I ever thought I would know or experience. And that's really the cornerstone of this presentation. It's the recognition that the very thing that feels it will kill us can become the very fuel to rise higher and stronger and with more intention than you thought possible. The very Jabberwocky that aims to disintegrate you, to slash you open and leave you for dead, acts just like the sword, the Vorpal sword, that can defeat this monster. In the same way that the Vorpal sword and its champion are the only thing that can defeat the Jabberwocky, it works both ways. And so the Jabberwocky is the only worthy enemy that can turn that challenger into a champion. And so while I absolutely am not a believer in the mentality of, I believe that everything happens for a reason, but I'm not a big fan of individuals who might say, like, your mom died for a reason. Because to be honest, no reason will ever be good enough for me to lose this person in my life. But at the same time, I think it really does call to questions. If we have our own Jabberwocky to face, then what makes up the Vorpal sword? And so in this situation, how do I do what I can to face this Jabberwocky head on, which is the challenge of losing my mom out of nowhere, and having a family that I love that has suddenly lost one of the cornerstone pieces? How do we go forward? And what does that Vorpal sword actually look like? And I think it looks different for everybody in their own situation. So with that said, y'all probably thought you were going to get away from this presentation without theory, but you're wrong. So I will say I'm going to only touch on theory a little bit, and I encourage you to look at these items on your own, because I do think that they are really important and helpful. But I only use this theory and these theories to frame how I went about seeking support. And so when I went into this situation and when I was facing the situation, there was no part of me that was just jumping in and ready and excited to organize my feelings for the rest of my life or figure out what I was going to do. But I really do think that this catastrophic occurrence in my life absolutely caused a massive, unprecedented transition, and having the tool to understand that and navigate that was really important. And at the same time too, just like a lot of people kind of face when they have something of this magnitude or any kind of transition, they really do question who they are and who they're going to choose to be. My mom, and many of you know who did know her, my mom was truly one of the most authentic human beings you'd ever meet. And she was true to herself through thick and thin. And I think along with that, I know for me, I felt really empowered after this terrible occurrence to figure out not just who I am, but to really realign with my values and to reinstate exactly what that looked like to me. So I would like to give a shout out to Magolda and Schlossberg, because they really helped me out in this process. And I think that using some of these areas, not just that we would provide the students that we work with, but using them to think about your own life and the Jabberwocky that you might face is really, really important. And so I am wrapping up. The last thing that I do want to kind of talk about, it really is to express a moment for my mama, myself, and those who are here that have known and loved her. I'll go ahead and say, I'm going to read it directly because you can hear it in my voice, but I'm getting a little teary. So it feels like a sin that I don't get to share with you the full extent of who my mama is and was. Boy, you were lucky to know her and lucky to be loved by her in any fashion, even if that fashion could be challenging at times. I could tell you how she would be there for you whenever you needed it, but you'd never know how it felt to attend an all-girls dinner in 8th grade out back for the 8th grade dance where no one would speak to you. And 15 minutes in to call her crying to find out she'd never left the parking lot. And within minutes was driving you over to Ross with her secret $20 bill to get you a new dress since yours had been laughed at. I could tell you she always looked for opportunities to have fun, but you wouldn't know that when we were little, she would wake all of us 4 tiny children up at 2 a.m. if it snowed, or have dance parties outside whenever it rained, or take us on.
Okay. Have a good one.
Take us on an adventure to the lake where she'd let us play fully clothed in the water and have a mud fight. You wouldn't know just how soft her hands were when she would hold yours, sitting next to you quietly and listening, or how love exploded out of her eyes when she looked at you, or how you couldn't find a better hype person in the universe when you made even the smallest achievement. I've never known someone who forced you to see how much you mattered, how valuable you were as a member of life, and what power and light you held when you were completely and thoroughly true to yourself. My mom lost both her parents by the time she was 15, and as much as it hurts to lay awake at night or to keep hoping I wake up from a nightmare of her loss, I don't believe anyone in this world could have prepared us better to lose her than the woman herself. Even more, I don't believe she has left our sides for a second. So until I meet you again, Mama, I will dance through life with the joy you instilled in every person you've ever known, the passion and happiness you've expressed over every great and small gift of life, and all my life. I will look forward to the day I get to feel like your little girl again, safe in your arms, and tell you all about this wonderful life you taught me to love and live. Thank you all for your patience, and I'm really thankful that you're here, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Aki, for sharing that story with us and for your presentation.
Absolutely.
I think if anyone has any comments or questions that they would like to share with Aki, please feel free to either share it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and share that directly. You know, getting some love on the chat for such a great job. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm grateful to you for taking the time to be with us today for the virtual conference.
Thank you.